Hey everyone, welcome to the Darshan Talks live stream. I'm your host, Darshan Kulkarni. It's my mission to help you trust the product, trust the people you depend on. As you may know, I'm an attorney, I'm a pharmacist, and I advise companies with FDA regulated products. So if you think about drugs, wonder about medical devices, obsess over pharmacy, this is the interview, this is the podcast, this is a live stream for you. I do want to emphasize that I am an attorney, my guest is an attorney, but we're not your attorney necessarily. So this is not legal advice. I am a pharmacist, but I'm not your pharmacist. This is not clinical advice. I do these podcasts, these interviews, because they're a lot of fun. I find myself talking to some really interesting people like my guest today. So it's just something I do because I enjoy it. But it's always nice to know if someone's listening. So if you like what you hear, please leave a comment, please subscribe. If you want to ask our guest questions, please feel free to leave that in the comments, and we'd be happy to ask the guest questions as well. Feel free to tag our guest. They will see that as well. Also, please feel free to share the video because we appreciate that. I do want to emphasize that these are considerations and they don't necessarily reflect the opinions of the host, the guest, our employers, or our clients. If you want to find me, you can actually find me on Twitter at Darshan Talks, or just go to our website at darshantalks.com. Today's interview is about international business. We've had our guest on before, and he was a welcome guest, really brought an international perspective to the conversations we have. So if you are interested in international transactions, what does that mean? How do you have a global impact? I know when I was going through law school, when I was in pharmacy school, we're always talking about global impact. And I do wonder if he had that perspective when he was going through it, or if he always knew he was going to have it, and what his career has been like. So if you care about that, you probably want to talk to our guest today. You'll probably want to ask questions. I do want to emphasize that our guest today is the chairman and founder of Bridgehouse Law LLP. It's a North Carolina-based law firm with offices in the U.S., Canada, and Germany. He is admitted to practice law as an attorney in the U.S., Germany, and Georgia, as well as with the U.S. Supreme Court. With over 25 years of experience in the international legal business community, he regularly speaks with leaders of government and business associations on important developments in international law. Our guest for today, ladies and gentlemen, Reinhard von Hennigs. How are you, Reinhard? Good to see you.
Darshan, always good to see you. I am perfect. How about yourself?
I'm well. I'm staying busy, and it's getting busier. And it sounds like things are getting even busier for you. And I want to talk a little bit about what that means and how it's gotten busy. So let's start with the obvious. Congratulations, because you are now officially honorary consul. So I want to first of all ask what the official title is and what does that actually mean?
Thank you, Darshan. Yes, I'm officially the Honorary Consul of the Federal Republic of Germany, located here in Charlotte. And Honorary Consul means that I have two different missions in mind. One is to help Germans in the region with paperwork, documentation. My office is able to process passports, for example, that is German passports. And we are able to notarize things where you would otherwise have to be in Germany in front of a so-called civil law notary.
Wow.
Certainly you appreciated that there are common law notaries, notary publics, and there are civil law notaries. And in different countries, a civil law notary has a different value as into the authenticity of the documents. So I can do that in an enumerated way of the law. So there are a couple of things I can do, a couple of things I cannot do. Let's talk about the other aspect, which I think is even more exciting. Not the service component to Germans is very exciting, but the other one is to be a messenger of the modern Germany, to be a messenger of what is Germany in the year 2021. What is Germany in light of the historic developments where Germany has a over 1,200 year long of history, and how did the German art and culture over times influence the world, and how did the world influence the German art and culture? So my topic here is to share my excitement as a German and American dual citizen. I have both flags, and therefore I'm really excited to serve Germany and the Germans here in my new home country, the United States.
So that is so cool. So let me start from the beginning. when you say you have to share the art and culture, I remember myself, and I still consider myself a complete noob. Don't have a clear understanding of art and culture. Did you have a passion for the arts before you started?
I did, yes. But by the same token, it is what I understand an expression of humanity. So whether you have a deeper knowledge of it or deeper training, I don't have that. And I appreciate that, you know. I have a piece of art behind me, which I received as a gift, which is a mural here in the city of Charlotte, done by an international artist. I got it after I finished my term as the chairperson of the Mayor's International Cabinet. I see you have art behind you, so art speaks. And
Yes.
I think it's fascinating to see how art develops, how art influences people in other parts of the world, and how Germany has so many things to offer, be it from education, be it from having one of the oldest and most reputable universities in the world. You may recall I attended Heidelberg University, the oldest German university. 1386 was the founding date. A couple of years before Christopher Columbus set foot in America, it was a working university. So there is so many things we can share about Germany, which was in the past as well as in the present. And the messenger of the modern Germany is something which I find fascinating. If you go to Berlin, for example, happy to take you on a tour when I'm next time in Berlin. Let's do that.
I love Berlin, but yeah, please.
You walk through the cities and you hear people speaking different languages. You see that younger folks, after graduating from the universities, go to Germany to find a job. I have one client in Berlin. They have hired locally nationals from over 100 countries. And the international knowledge-driven person knows that there are about 200 countries out, you know, between 196 and 202, depending on how you count and what's the country and what's considered to be independent. So which means this one client of mine has 1/2 of the world represented in its organization. And for me, that's cool. That's fascinating. But that's what many people do not think about Germany. They think of Germany as in somewhere stuck in the 19th century Wilhelminic times. And it was different at that time. So now it's in modern Germany, and I'm happy to be part of that modern Germany.
So that's really interesting because I think Germany is a really interesting country to talk about. It's got a really sad past, and when we talk about the world wars, and now it's probably one of the most progressive countries in terms of the types of immigrants that they're allowing in and the people they're welcoming. And you talk a little bit about diversity. You're talking about the impact and the importance of the people who are coming in and how they're represented. In your opinion, in terms of diversity, do you think that modern Germany gets its power from that diversity, or do you think it's more France-like, where they're saying, we want you to be French? And if you've come to France, and I'm not dissing France, it's just a difference in perspective. You're coming to France, we want you to be French, as opposed to what I'm seeing more in Germany, which is we want you to be part of that cultural mix and bring your own flavors to it.
The way how you phrase it makes me agree with your second alternative, which is Germany welcomes the diversity. And what many folks may not know that couple of 100 years ago, there was a king in Prussia who reached out and said, you can come to our country if you want to live and work here. And a lot of French, the Huguenots, who were prosecuted for religious beliefs, as in you are the wrong Christian, you know, you're not the right Christian, you're the wrong Christian. And he said, we're welcoming everybody. So come on over. We want the talent. We want the people of knowledge. And he built in the center of Berlin the French Dome to have a welcoming place for worship in French, as a part where everybody could come over there. And what many people don't realize that this open world approach was very much a custom over the past centuries. If you fast forward the initiative of current Chancellor Angela Merkel, she's in her last days in power, but one of her initiatives was to say, we need to open the German borders to folks who are prosecuted in their native countries. And a group of refugees from Syria and other countries who felt that they needed to take shelter in Germany got in, and Germany was able to not only integrate them, but also to make them feel welcome and to be a productive part of society. And if you talk about any time in between, it was for me also fascinating to see how in the steel and iron movement of the late 1900s, of the late 19th century, you had a good movement from people from Poland to come over to the Ruhr Valley, and they were important for that. In the 1960s, we had a group of Turkish immigrants entering Germany because there was a shortage of labor. So I think Germany has a very long tradition of welcoming others, and being an open, modern society certainly helps. And yes, you mentioned with a little aside, there was a bad part of history, and there was a part of involvement in World War I and II. I think many countries have things to share which are good and bad. And at the end, for me, as a messenger of the modern Germany, it's time to reflect. If you give me one more chance, next week we are commemorating on November 9th many remarkable days in the German history, between very joyous days over to very sad days. And November 9th is a day where I'm actually invited to participate at an event at Davidson College here outside of Charlotte, which focuses on the so-called Crystal Night. That's when the pogrom against Jewish Germans started. And it was a very sad day of the German history. On the same day, the German unification happened. So it's fascinating to see how the November 9th has so many different facets to that. And I was in Berlin when the Berlin Wall fell. So I was there November 9th, November 10th. For me, it's really exciting time. But it's time to reflect. It's time to say, Germany has so much to offer. Pick your preferred time, but don't get stuck in a certain time zone. That's probably the message.
Which is really interesting to me. You talk about some of these really interesting moments in German history, which I think is such an interesting contrast to today. And what I'm talking about is this idea that Germany is probably one of the most powerful countries in Europe right now, if not the world itself. Probably the world itself, to be clear. And they are a very, very inclusive group at this moment. You contrast that to Brexit, and you talk about London, the UK coming out and saying, we are not happy with our jobs being taken away by immigrants, for example. I guess my question for you is, when you talk about diversity, you talk about equity, you talk about inclusion, one of the core components of that is making people feel welcome. And as part of that, you talked about the Poles, and you talked about the Turks coming through, and that's been part of the strength of Germany. On the other hand, we're seeing some, for lack of a better term, growing pains associated with Brexit. Do you think that the impact of Brexit is going to have a positive effect on Germany, which is going to end up solidifying its power, a soft power, I guess, solidifying soft power in Germany? Or do you think it's going to result in a duopoly of countries with multiple power centers in Europe? And what is the impact going to be on the life sciences growing as you continue?
Yeah, it's a brilliant question. And as much as I smiled when you did your disclaimers earlier on to say, well, we are not lawyers, we are not pharmacists, we are just friends and humans talking. What I say right now is definitely not with my new role as the Honorary Consul, because as the Honorary Consul, I would not comment on the Brexit.
Absolutely.
As an individual, I believe that the United Kingdom, France, and Germany are the three most important economic settings, economic powerhouses in Europe. And they also had a significant impact in the European Union. And I always found it was refreshing how those three allies created a variance of alliances. So sometimes the French wanted something nobody else wanted, and then the Germans and the Brits cooperated and blocked the French. And sometimes Germany and France wanted something and England blocked it. And those alliances changed over the times when all three countries, the United Kingdom, France, and Germany, were part of the European Union. Now it broke down to 2. And I wonder, from a more esoteric, philosophical, political, historical component, what does it mean when you have one power who is no longer a power in the European Union network, and it's a duality? Who will win? Will Europe need a third power, and if so, who is that? Spain, Poland, I don't know. Will Europe be happy with its duality? Will the power of people and purchasing power, both in France and Germany, kind of like create a us versus them? So where all the other 27 countries kind of like bundle up, 25 versus 2. What will it do? And that's something I'm really curious to see how future will shape out. I do believe that the European Union lost in UK not being part of the European Union, and I believe the UK lost as well. I think the loss is very hard right now in UK when all of a sudden European workers cannot work there anymore, and there's a shortage of food, there's a shortage of gasoline, there's a shortage of so many items because you cannot ship it, or you cannot transport it because once the goods are somewhere, you have no truckers to move them around. And that's a very much of a concern, that we have a country which is one of the wealthy countries in the world now having empty shelves, not because the purchase power is not there, but because we are lacking humans, we are lacking truckers, we are lacking people who put food on the shelves. And that's for me a direct impact of the Brexit. And I feel sorry for all of my friends and actually family members who I have in the United Kingdom who describe their daily quest for food as something they didn't expect when the Brexit happened. From the European Union, I think the complication will come over time when you see and when you realize that you have integrated transactions within Europe where they don't work anymore. And just the other day, I witnessed a transaction between a British company and a German company, and the warehouse which processed this whole transaction was in Italy. And when I saw that, I said, folks, why did you do that? And the answer was, well, for us, it was important to get container loads of items out of the UK. We killed our warehouse in the UK because we don't need it anymore. Of course, I felt sorry for the landlord who had this warehouse, but we created a secondary warehouse in Italy, and we're using our Italian warehouse now as a shipping hub for all over the European Union, because we are now subject to one-time customs clearing and one-time getting the items in. And then once it's in, you can just drop ship it to whoever is out there. Whereas in the pre-Brexit days, they shipped it straight from England, straight from their warehouse. So there is more hassle for all of us. And I think on the long run, I can only hope and wish that the trade relations between the UK and the European Union will continue to grow and continue to be better.
So you talk about the duopoly, for example, and you talked about Germany and France being sort of this. As we continue, they will become the two powerhouses of Europe, and Britain will do its own thing for right now. I guess my question to you is, and again, none of what we speak about represents your role as honorary consul. It's more your perspective as an individual. And my question for you, from your perspective as an individual, is: do you see Turkey coming in and acting as a third powerhouse? Because I know it's not part of the European Union. They've been trying to get in for like forever. And my question for you is, as Britain leaves, does it create a power vacuum that allows countries like Turkey to come in? Because I don't remember the exact voting breakdowns, but my recollection is that Britain played a huge role in saying we don't need more members in the European Union, and that now you've sort of losing that. Does it create an opportunity for Britain, for Germany to say maybe we want to bring Turkey back in and consider that voting bloc, if you will?
I think the long-standing phrase from the European Union towards Turkey is an associated state which is on the waiting list to join the European Union. And I may be wrong, but if I recall correctly, that over the past years, Turkey had to do a little bit of homework internally, and then after they fulfilled the homework, European Union would be open for admitting them to membership. I do believe that in the current situation, Turkey is either not doing the homework or they are very slow in doing the homework. So I would say give it a couple of more years until Turkey fulfills certain of the requirements, and we may see more after that. I don't think that it is a question of where UK being out or in will have an impact. But again, it could be just me not knowing the whole picture. But my thought is Turkey needs to fulfill a couple of requirements before being considered.
Fair enough. And to be perfectly fair, I haven't looked into the issue. It was just something I'd heard, and those things could be wrong. So I probably don't have full context either. I do want to ask another question, which is, you talk about how you are a representative of modern Germany. One of the things that was really interesting to me when I visited Germany are the stark contrasts in the internationality, if that's the right word, between, say, a Frankfurt and a Munich versus a Berlin. And they're all very international cities, but they have very different tastes on what that internationality looks like. Could you comment on, when you talk about representing Germany, what Germany do you represent, and how is that different? How are the flavors different for someone who's saying, I want to do work in Germany, or I want to bring work out of Germany?
That's a brilliant question. And I'm almost ready to ask you one of the questions back. If you are a representative of the United States, do you represent Alaska, Hawaii, California?
Yeah.
Or do you represent New York, Philadelphia? What do you represent? So Germany has 16 different states, and Germany is historically so much of a inner European battleground, because pretty much no movement within Europe is possible without crossing Germany, north, east, south, west. So if you want to go from France by rail or by road to Poland, you have to cross Germany. If you come from Denmark, you want to go to anywhere south, you have to cross Germany. So Germany is kind of like this cross-through country. And the western part of Germany, for example, in the area of Baden-Württemberg, which is bordering France, has a very strong French influence. You have French cooks who just work on the other side of the border. If you are closer to the Polish border, you see a Polish influence there. If you're closer to the northern part of Germany, you see other influences. So I think it's fascinating to see that Germany is a state. It's a federal republic. It has 16 different states, but each state has a different flavor. And the flavor of Massachusetts differs from the flavor of Texas. So does the flavor of Berlin differ from the flavor of Bavaria or Munich. So it's different. So back to your question, who do you represent? All, because that's all Germany, and the variety makes it even more exciting.
I think your point's fair, very, very fair. And in retrospect, the question is not a fair question. So I appreciate you answering the way you did. But I will answer it this way, which is, I think that in most transactions in the US, we have, for example, certain states you will default to. So for example, if you want strong employee protections, you're probably going to aim for like a California. If you want strong corporate protections, you're probably going to aim for like a Delaware. And then there are countries in between. Florida has its own flavor, blah, blah, blah. So a huge portion of who do you represent as a lawyer comes down to where's your company located, where is the nexus of business, and what perspective are you bringing to the table? Does that same thought process apply in Germany, or is it the fact that it's a federated country? Does that mean that it? I tried to use a term you did. I could be wrong by what I just said, but does that help in deciding where jurisdiction will be and how you're going to frame? Like, are there cultural differences in how you create a contract or how do you create a transaction?
And that's a brilliant question. I appreciate the follow-up here. And the quick answer is no, it's not that much of a difference. So just from lawyer to lawyer, the German bar is a universal bar. So if you're a member of the bar in Berlin, you can practice all over Germany. And if you change your residency from one state to the other state, you get immediately bar admitted once you change the residency upon the proper application. Why? Because the idea is that the German legal system is so close enough from state to state that the differences are so small. The majority of the corporate law all of the corporate law is the same. There is no state corporate law. And you see differences maybe in certain regulatory works, police, school, and you name it. German constitution has a similarity to the US constitution, where the federal government has enumerative powers, and therefore the German government has enumerative powers. But the legal system is the same. So the contracts of the state of Bavaria and the contracts of the Free State of Hamburg are the same. It's the same code, it's the same law, it's the same interpretation. So it doesn't really matter where you go. You asked about the employment situation. Germany is regulated by much more employment rules than the United States has. There's a higher role the unions have, and different companies have actually a mandatory representative of the unions on the board of the company. And this is a federal law again, and it doesn't really matter which state you are in. So I think the question would be, where do you see the talent? Where do you see the business partners? And if you are in the tech world, biotech, life sciences, you may want to go to Munich because there are lots of clusters there. Think about the Boston Innovation or the Research Triangle Park here in North Carolina. So there's a reason for that. If you are into media and communications and movie production, you may want to go to Cologne and the western part of North Rhine-Westphalia, as they have that knowledge. If you are very much engaged in different automotive things, you may want to go near Stuttgart, where you have the headquarters of Porsche and Mercedes, and lots of German suppliers which we work with. They have an office on operation or a factory down there because it's just more practical for them. So what I see is most companies who come to us are already established, and they come from where they are to the United States. When we advise American or non-American companies how to enter the German market, it boils down to, where do you find your most fruitful resources? What is your best platform? And we advise on the location, to talk to those location scouts. As from a legal point of view, I don't see a difference.
We can do an entire conversation on how you advise those clients, and it sounds like we need to do that conversation next time you're on, because I want to talk about how do you engage location scouts and what is that process like, because it sounds fascinating from a pure international business perspective. But we are well past our time, and I want to respect that. So as you know, I'm going to ask you a couple of questions. Well, 5. The first question you've already answered, which is, how can people contact you? So go ahead.
Yeah, best is go to my website, reinhardvonhennigs.com, and contact information is there available. Or send me an email at reinhard.vonhennigs@bridgehouse.law.
And also, for those people who like the phone, which I'm not quite sure why people are using the phone anymore, because apparently we don't pick up the phone anymore, but that's the phone number on the screen as well. So that would be wonderful if you reach out to Reinhard, ask him questions. Here's a question for you. What would you like to ask the audience?
Well, Darthan, I think you inspired my thoughts about what do people think about Germany. And I would really love to hear, what do you think about Germany? What is the first thing which comes to mind, and what is it you would like to know about Germany? Share your thoughts about Germany with me.
I will start it, and I think it's so stereotypical. I feel a little shy admitting this, but I'm thinking of Bavarian pretzels, and that's such a horrible thing to say. But you take a full country and you bring it down to pretzels. But on the other hand, I think that's fair. When you flip it to the other side and you go America, you think of cowboy hats. So
or donuts.
What's that?
Or donuts.
Or donuts, exactly. So maybe it's not completely unfair.
Yeah.
I never realized, is donuts a truly American thing?
I don't know. I think the form definitely is, and I think there are German bakers who believe they made donuts as well. So I think it's a more universal thing. Or maybe we take bagels instead.
Very how New York of you. Yeah, absolutely. So here's another question. What's something you learned in the last month?
What I learned last month is definitely with my new role as the Honorary Consul, I learned a lot. And I also learned lots of technical little things with regard to that. What I learned and what really touched me most is that there is a special process for Germans who lost their nationality during the Holocaust because they vacated Germany. They made it out of Germany before all the disaster happened. And in the part of that, they may have lost their nationality due to an act of the German government at that time, or they lost it because they got naturalized as, for example, an American citizen. And there's a shortened process to get a German passport, a German nationality again. And that's a cool thing I learned. I learned how to do it. And my first act as the Honorary Consul was actually to process one of those one of those nationality applications according to Section 116, to Article 116, Section 2 of the German Constitution. So that's pretty cool.
That is really interesting. I was just reading one of the big questions you read on the. So I'm very interested in financial freedom. That's a whole subculture out there. And as part of that, they talk about passports and they talk about having citizenship in different countries and having multiple nationalities. I just read that one of the hardest ones to get is Germany, and one of the easiest ones to get is Italian for some reason, which I didn't fully understand. But apparently that's true. And if you have enough money, Portugal. But I thought that was really interesting because I think from what I gather, getting a German passport is extremely valuable, extremely useful. The only one that probably compares in Europe is probably Switzerland, which is not part of the EU, obviously. But it's interesting to know that if you have been rendered stateless or you lost your state because of the Holocaust, they have process to bring you back home, for lack of a better term.
It's an easy process, absolutely. Yeah, it's so true. And the nationality is certainly something. When you said if you're rendered stateless, it is something the German government very early on, based on the German Constitution, talks about how to treat statelessness, and that's something where I think it's an obligation to people, but also we define ourselves from our rights, where to travel to with our nationality. And I can see a future society where it doesn't matter anymore which nationality you have, but in the current state, it's important that you have a passport in hand, that you are recognized as a citizen of some country.
I'm going to ask a question, and I haven't looked into this topic, but I remember reading somewhere that under the Geneva Convention, a human being is not allowed to be stateless. Is that accurate, or did I misread that somewhere? Do you happen to not know anything about this?
Let's do some research and talk about it next time.
That sounds perfect. Here's another question. What's something that made you happy in the last week?
Made me happy. I think last week was always looking back into moments where things happen in my family, and two of my kids are now living and studying in Germany, and it made me very happy that on a specific occasion I talked to one of my children, and I got this feeling of this child, almost 19-year-old, arrived by all means. It's not only the physical being there, but the emotional being there. So the fact that, I feel home here, or I feel good here, and I'm no longer this recent transplant from America to Germany. The feeling of that the kids are now in Germany and they feel home there made me really happy.
That's really, really cool.
Not that they're in Germany, of course, I'm happy about that, but that you have this late teenage child who is no longer a child, but a young adult, able to say, I'm here, and I feel good about it. And that's a level of independence I'm happy about that the kids reach that.
And I imagine it also feels like they're connected with a part of you that you left there somehow. And the fact that they can connect with that is validating. And last question, what's something most people don't know about you?
I play the violin, and I like it.
Huh. Are you good, or like I play the violin, but I'm terrible. I don't even own the violin, but I imagine you're better than me. Like, were you professional or semi-professional, or how did that work?
Well, I'm a founding member of the Atlanta Lawyers Orchestra, and I played it for many years when we lived in Atlanta there. Now here in Charlotte, it kind of like dwindled down a little bit, but the violin is out there. I play it when I need time off and to relax, and I felt I always had a good level of proficiency, and always try to keep it up.
That's such an interesting question. I'm going to ask one question about it just because I'm so fascinated by the fact that you actually are good at it. Do you, as a violin player, stick to the classics, or do you actually try to talk about modern pop music as well? Play modern pop.
If I have the notes, why not? One of my last public performances was in Stone Mountain in Atlanta at a concert there, which was given before the laser show happened, and the Atlanta Lawyers Orchestra was asked to participate there. And we had a whole Roger and Hammerstein, Gershwin, modern interpretation of American classics. That's certainly not the rock and the pop question you had in mind, but for me, the repertoire pretty much is down to music needs to give you a good feeling. Music is there to create emotions on both ends, on the listener as well as on the one who's playing the instrument. So if the emotions are good, why not? I'm more agnostic there. I do prefer the late Baroque and early classic time. That's kind of like my personal niche. But by the same token, music is great, and if it sounds good, it is good. Let's do it.
That's awesome. Reinhard, this was wonderful having you on. We have so many more questions to ask, so I do hope you'll consider coming back again.
Absolutely, would be honored. Thanks, Darshan, for having me today.
Thank you again.